Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Well, hello there. Welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
And I am spiritual medium Kelly White. Hello, everybody.
And hi, John. Wonderful John is with us.
Hello, ladies.
Hey, and before I forget, I want to do a shout out to Lee and Marlene, our big
Yes.
fan. Hi, Lee. Hi, Marlene.
Hi, Lee and Marlene.
And if you come in wintertime, you might be able to meet Lee.
I would love that. Yes.
Such a great guy. You will love him. And
We'll
I also
plan
want
something for sure.
to plan that. And I also wanted to say a shout out to Sandy, Don's friend Sandy, who's our friend, my friend too, who I just love. PhD in history. You'd love this
Nice.
guy.
Oh,
So
wow.
fascinating. But he last week was watching the show and he's got a special number. His number is 327. That's his special number between Don and Sandy. That's their numbers, 327.
327. Oh, that's interesting.
The first caller that called, her birth date was 327.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So he was quite shocked.
That's wonderful.
Which is a good story, right? I mean,
that's a sign of something. I don't know what it is. That's your department, but it's a sign of something.
Synchronicity.
Yeah, we've done a show on that.
We have done a show on that. And speaking of, would you guys like to know what's going on now?
Oh, please. Yes.
It's a fascinating time. Today is an 11/11. It's November 11th. Yeah. And it's a very magical time that we have right now, this November 11th. And it's actually the most magical day of the year today. It means from a numerologically, so because it hits two areas, it hits numerology and it hits astrology. Because from a numerological thing, it's in 1111, which is a power number times 2. And 11 is a power number. You've got an 1111 is a real power number. We speak of it numerologically. And because an 11 links us to the ascended masters and our spirit guides. And for instance, when somebody says, oh, you see an 1111, make a wish, or 111 and make a wish.
Right.
Well, that's actually based on the thought that the universe is listening to your thoughts whenever there's an 1111 or a 111, because it's a doorway. A 1111 is a doorway. And so it's a reminder from the universe that we are in spiritual alignment with them, with the other side. And on this day, our actions are amplified. So it's a very, very powerful, powerful day from 1111 standpoint. It brings in a deep intuition, but that's not enough. We have a really ultra rare situation today. Mercury, which is retrograde right now, is transiting across the sun. It only happens 13 times in a year. In a century.
Oh my goodness. 13 times in a century?
In a century. The next time will be in 2032. And that's how rare this is. And what it really means is from a spiritual standpoint, you can stand out of space and time, if you will, today. It's one of those days from a previous decision that you had made. So you can kind of pull yourself out from some decision that you had made, whatever it happens to be, and choose again. It gives you like a chance to let go of whatever you had chosen the first time and really look into it. Do I want to make a different decision now? And if I do, how do I do this? Am I supported in doing this? It's a very spiritual day. So it would bring you a lot of clarity to do that, actually. And it also means emotional release. It's also an emotional release day. So it helps you to face your inner emotions and confront whatever you neglected with before. It's a very important time. Also, you might want to, today is a day and tomorrow is a day to reflect on the life that you want to live. Because tomorrow we have this moon in Taurus, it's an amazing event tomorrow as well. But reflect on the life you want to live, about the person who you are, who you want to become, and the things you want to achieve. Write down your goals, write down your life purpose, do visualization, and this period of time that we're in is very interesting too. It's called an occultation, and the word occult comes from that. You know, the occult, the things that you may not be able to see. And then this is when two celestial bodies, they not only align, and I'm talking about Mercury and the Sun, but it's so precise that one body literally passes over the other. So it's a very rare event today, and also this moon tomorrow. So really set some goals for yourself of what do you want to do with your life? Who are you? What are you about? It's an excellent time for completing long-term goals too, as well. So it's one of the best moons that we have in a year. This is this special frost. They call it a frost moon. Or they call it a beaver moon because they set beaver traps, and a frost moon because it's usually one of the first snows. And I can actually attest to that right now in Wisconsin.
Didn't you tell me it was snowing today?
That's correct, Cheryl. It was. That's correct.
We've been having a heat wave. So there you have it.
I remember those days very well.
You're snowing and I'm driving around with the top down.
Okay.
Go figure.
Go figure. Anyway, so let's talk about overwhelm.
It's so funny, though, how it's shifted from this whole year, especially September, and October, where you were talking about how things were going to shift and it was going to get crazy and the energy, and it's all about transformation, all that stuff. And now it seems to be coming back to, okay, now start to think about what you want the rest of your life to look like, or at least this next phase in your life to look like.
It is, because when we get to 2020, it's so a lot of change goes on, a lot of change for people. And so I think people now are going to be confronted with things that maybe they've want to look back, something that maybe they had done or said to somebody they want to, to apologize for, want to have a different take on things now. It's a deep time, deep. And it brings clarity. So you'll be thinking clearer, and it brings great intuition today and tomorrow. Yeah.
That's right.
It is.
That's lovely. Oh, thank you, Jessica. Jessica says, glad that I'm back. I had a little bit of had a little sick last Monday, but we're good. So thank you.
Feel good?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Good, Cheryl.
So overwhelm. That is, I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing about what you have to say about it. It always interests me, the spiritual aspect of it. And from a neurobiological standpoint, it's when the nervous system gets overwhelmed, when it's too much for the nervous system.
So what would cause that?
Well, when the nervous system gets overwhelmed, it's interesting. It could be something that's happening, like a moment of stress, and anything that overwhelms the nervous system can cause symptoms of PTSD or can cause symptoms of trauma. So for one person who, for whatever reason, is very resilient and nervous system, there's no right or wrong. It just kind of is how your nervous system is. And so for someone, let's say maybe a car accident or something like that may not cause symptoms of PTSD, and for someone else it might. But anything that overwhelms the nervous system is considered trauma, and a possible, you might have symptoms related to it. So trauma is no longer what we thought it was, where it had to be like these big events, But the interesting thing is also from a somatic standpoint, what I see in my office is when you haven't experienced a lot of positive things. And for example, I'm working with someone and I say, imagine someone, cherishing you or loving you, or someone said a kind word. Can you let that in? And all of a sudden tears come. And the nervous system is getting overwhelmed because you don't have a container for positive stuff. If your nervous system didn't get to experience a lot of positive when you were little, 0 to 5 is when the brain develops, then anything positive is going to cause overwhelm because you're just not used to it. You don't really have a container for it. So your nervous system has a hard time tolerating it, even though we can say, oh, I want good things to happen in my life, or I want a great relationship. I want a loving relationship. But if you haven't experienced that, it can come at you and you're just going to let it slide by because you can't hold on to it. You have no container for it. So when you sit and you kind of let it and you feel it and you let it pass, then you start to build a bigger container for it.
So if somebody comes to you and they say, I'm overwhelmed, I lost my job, I lost my home, I don't know I've got all these kids, I don't know what to do. I mean, real overwhelm. from a psychological
on that end of it,
standpoint,
yeah.
on that end of it, how do you bring them back to get them grounded into their body again? Because spiritually, what happens is when there's too much that happens, they can't process it. It's too much to process at once. And so I know my mom used to say, get in your left brain,
Right,
balance
in
your
order to
checkbook
process it,
in
yeah.
order to, to calm yourself almost in a sense. But what happens is with a lot of people that are HSP, highly sensitive people, or people that are empaths, they kind of go out of their body when they get overwhelmed. And then what happens is when they get that overwhelmed, they make decisions that are so bad that it follows them into their future.
Yeah.
And we're going to have Charlene is going to call our guest. Charlene today is going to call and tell us about her story, because that's how I wanted to do a topic on overwhelm, because from her standpoint, she had an unbelievable story here.
Yeah.
And it caused her so much overwhelm, and then she made bad decisions.
Yeah.
And from a spiritual standpoint, we need somebody to, when the soul kind of takes off and goes, like this, you need to get them back in the body. Often what I'll say to somebody is take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And I'm sure you probably do that from a somatic standpoint too. Take a deep breath and tune into exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's when that happens, you're kind of stuck in like a fight or flight place, so you can't think. You literally, when we're on overwhelm, the thinking part of the brain, which is this part, the cortex, goes offline like a computer. So you're coming from your emotional place, which is why your mom used to show people how to go into their left brain, which I do too. If you need a quick fix, and say you're going somewhere where you're going to see someone who, I don't know, was mean to you. I had this one gal going in and seeing, an ex, her husband's ex-girlfriend, or someone he was having an affair with, something like that. It was going to be very emotional. And I go, you need to stay in your left brain when you go there. And so it's counting backwards, 300, 299, 298, because it causes you to think. It's not 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, because that's too easy.
Right.
And if you remain in your left brain, or keep your left brain connected, your thinking brain connected, then you can not be overwhelmed and not do things that you would later regret. But that's why, because overwhelm, you're almost kind of stuck in fight or flight, and your thinking brain is offline. So you will not make good decisions during that time. So when I work with people and we have the luxury of time, I'll have them sit and they're telling me about all this stuff that overwhelms them. And I'll just have them sit, what does that feel like? As you're telling me this, what are you noticing? Oh, my chest is tight, or my tummy is tight. And we'll just wait and see what happens next. See, the problem with overwhelm is that what we do is when it goes up like this, we shut it down right here because it's too scary. It's too much. So we'll either have a drink, take drugs, distract ourselves, overwork, something to shut it down right here. But if we allowed it to pass, what goes up always comes down, including the nervous system. So if we just give it time, it will pass. And that allows your mind and your nervous system to have the experience of, oh, what came up came down. But if we shut it down here, which is what we do because it gets too much, then we never get to experience that. So every time we feel overwhelmed, it becomes scarier and scarier and scarier, and we do more and more and more to shut it down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what people do.
Yeah, because it's too scary. But if you know that what comes up will always come down, and you're able to just sit with it, which then you use techniques of grounding to help you, not get too overwhelmed. So you ground yourself, just your seat in the chair, or your feet on the ground, or you look around and you really take focus on what's around you, then you can tolerate and wait until it comes back down. Right. Joanna's saying, that's how I feel. I just can't think, so I shut down. Yeah. I mean, that's what happens. That's what the brain does.
Brain shuts down.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sometimes it gets so overwhelming that we dissociate. That's when kids, when they're, that's how multiple personality come, when the trauma is so big that it's so much that it's overwhelming every possible system in your body, then you split or you dissociate. And that's why it's important to have tools to ground you while you're feeling it. So you're not just going way over the top and then your mind dissociates. The mind is brilliant. It will do whatever it takes to survive.
Right.
So if something is too stimulating, then the brain will dissociate to not feel it. So it's important to stay grounded as much as possible so you can process through it.
And from a spiritual standpoint, what we want to do is we want to remember, even though the brain is going and you're overwhelmed, remember that there is a higher power here. Remember that you're a soul having this human experience, and the experience will pass. And that if you can remember that there's a higher power and kind of give into that, if you can kind of give into the control of that, that tends to calm you down. It'll be okay. Another thing is it'll be okay tomorrow. Tomorrow is a better day. That's another one too that we use spiritually. And the other way is if you can find somebody to talk to, whether it's a friend, a therapist, but somebody who's grounded that will say to you, it will be okay.
Yeah.
That tends to calm the nervous system, and it puts the soul back in the body again, breathing, taking deep breaths, and then take the next deep breath would be after you calm yourself is, all right, let's get practical. And that again puts you back in that left brain, which is a place you want to be when you're overwhelmed, so you can think clear. But breathing, now Susie says she blacks out. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Well, that's because it's
So
the overwhelm is so over, which is why it's so important to not just, wait and pass through it, because sometimes it's too much. And again, the brain will do whatever it takes. That's how people pass out. That's what fainting is all about, when it's just too much, too fast. So I think knowing that, that's a great tool from a spiritual standpoint, knowing that it will pass. Well, how was it that you said it?
You ask for a higher power. You literally bring in a higher power. You ask and you give it to this higher power because it will pass. And if you can say tomorrow's a better day, tomorrow is a better day, or and it actually works. Another thing is take off your shoes and walk around and breathe. Feel the ground, feel the ground, and breathe. If you can it slows you down.
Yeah, all those are grounding techniques. And when you said about, have someone that you trust, that's from a somatic standpoint, that's someone to just sit with you and hold the space. We all kind of have a tendency to go into fix-it mode and want to fix it for them. And sometimes someone just needs to know that you're sitting here with me, holding the space of my overwhelm, and then I can let it pass, because you're there kind of being a witness and holding the space with me. So that's so important. Let's see, Joanne says, my heart says it'll be okay, but my mind doesn't. I find myself lately so emotional over everything. It's the mind sometimes gets in the way. We're supposed to be the more intelligent form, and we're not, because the mind gets in the way. The thinking part of the brain gets in the way. Yeah. So find something, Joanne, that works.
Change the dial, Joanne. Change the dial. With this one. And then this is one where you would say, all right, I'm going to give it to a higher space, higher power. And you've got a brain that needs some action there. You need a brain. Read a book. You do something that would you say, Shirley, to occupy her brain?
You can, right. I mean, you can distract yourself, but you're doing it consciously, or putting your hand on your heart. You're saying your heart says it will be okay. Then trust your heart. What gets in the way of trusting your heart if your heart is telling you that it's going to be okay? I would be curious about that. There's some somatic moves that you can do, is putting one hand here and one hand here and kind of holding yourself like that can work. That can be really helpful, because it almost feels like you're giving yourself a hug, but from a somatic standpoint, there's something about you're holding yourself. Also, EMDR technique is, we call this the butterfly hug, where you're doing this alternatively tapping. And you can do it, some people say, well, this is so obvious, like when you're out, but you can do it on the sides of your leg.
Oh, I love that.
This can help calm down, because you're bilaterally stimulating the brain, and that can help calm down when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Well, it's interesting too that you did the hug, because I was doing a Tai Chi class today, and they do the hug in Tai Chi. Tai Chi is energy movements. So it's the hug. Another thing that they do, which is interesting from a Peter Levine standpoint, is that they do this thing called, like the lion. And you actually physically become this lion in your body, and you're making these movements that slow you down. And I'll tell you what's interesting about that. When you become this lion, it takes your brain into another zone. You're not who you are at that moment. And so it redirects the energy, refocuses and redirects and takes you out of your pain and suffering, if you will.
Yeah.
And yoga during a time like this is really amazing.
Really helpful.
Very helpful for overwhelm.
The idea of the lion is it also puts you in a place where you feel powerful. A lion is very powerful, and that's where imagery uses the primitive part of the brain, and that part doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So if you're putting yourself as a lion and you're walking as a lion, you become the lion, and that's very powerful. There's no overwhelm, it's power.
I did today, Cheryl. You should have seen me. I was like,
I had no idea you took a Tai Chi class.
I did. Oh, I'm busy in this small town.
Wow. That small town is really blowing me away with all its alternative beautiful stuff. Tell our audience who you found. You found
I found a woman that's going to be on our show, I think in January. She has she was shocking. I was shocked. She has a product called like Zodiaca or something like that. It's perfume based on your astrology sign.
And that's in where? Oh yeah, Wisconsin. I haven't found someone
in Wisconsin,
in Los Angeles that does that, but you did in Wisconsin.
Okay. I mean, and she's on QVC all the time, so this will be really interesting. Yeah,
that'll be fantastic.
It'll be fun. But yeah, I was surprised too out here. But this lion pose did get my energy really going, really going. And there are techniques that you can do when you are overwhelmed. The first thing I would say is reach out. Call somebody that's not going to make fun of you, somebody that's going to acknowledge you, somebody that's going to be is grounded and wise. Find somebody. If you don't have a friend like that, find a therapist, somebody that'll say it, but almost I want to say a more loving, somebody that's loving. It's okay.
Yeah, who's just going to sit there and hold the space with you. Not someone who's going to, make you want to snap out of it or give you, what to do or how to. There's always a place for that, of course, but maybe sometimes you just want kind of to be emotionally held,
Well, sure, because if your needs are not met when you were younger, you may not have the container so when things do happen and in life, there are those really challenging times where, this is happening and this and this and this at the same time. That's a tough one, but it does happen to everybody. Everybody has experienced that on some level.
Oh, yeah. Everybody. And Lynn, you're saying I get so nervous when I'm overstimulated, very uncomfortable to say the least. Right. So I love what you're saying, Lynn, is, by the way, hi, is to know yourself well enough to know that, what causes overstimulation if it's something that you can help. Like, for example, too many people. I can't stand being in places with too many people. So when I know that's going to happen, I gear myself up for it. Or I try and stay away from it. So it's just knowing yourself well enough to help yourself with that. Yeah.
And we have Charlene on hold and ready to tell her story. John, I think it's a great time.
Hi, Charlene.
Hi, Char. Can you hear us? Are you there?
Just so you know.
Hey, Charlene, you're on the air with us.
There she is.
There, yeah, I see you both, and I just didn't hear you there. Like, if you say something, let me see if I hear you.
Yeah,
okay. Hi, Charlene.
Just listen to your telephone. Go ahead and mute Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Hi, ladies. Yeah, so I love your show, The Overwhelm. Yes, I've been there. My overwhelmness started in 2006, but it probably started before that. But one thing I wanted to say, because your show's very, only an hour, I just want to make this short, is that sometimes I didn't know I was overwhelmed, just so you know, because I know there's an overwhelm for fear, fear like, you're going to be attacked, or then there's an overwhelm for anxiety, as if you're going to do something in the future, you're overwhelmed because of something in the future you don't know is going to happen yet. But mine was due to stress, and because I had a very stressful corporate job, I was used to stress, so I didn't really know I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So to start with that.
That's an interesting point.
My overwhelmness caused a lot of problems.
So tell us what happened, because this is how the topic came up.
Yeah. Yes. Well, okay. So I'm working 12-hour, 9-hour days. I drive an hour to and from work. This goes on for 15 years. And so I'm very used to it. I have a very high profile job, but you know, after 10 years, you get used to stuff like that. So you're pretty much capable. You think that you can move on to maybe think about marriage, think about a kid, right? So you figure, guy, I've worked hard. I got this money. I got this great job. It's been 10 years. I think I'm pretty secure. So you go for it, and you have a house now. You've had your house for 10 years. You've got your job for over 10 years. And, you know, then you start breaking your rules. And like I had a rule, never live with anyone. Never let a man live with you unless you're married. Only because, you know, it's just a rule that I had. There wasn't a rule out there. I mean, some people probably have it, but I didn't. And of course, when you're doing really well, sometimes you think, just like you could spend money because you have it, you think you could break rules because you're, you know, maybe can fix them easier. The problem with that is you really can't. And so when you're overwhelmed because of stress, you're taking on too much. And at the same time, you might be thinking, you know, let me add more to my stress. Let me get married, maybe have a kid, you know, but you're not thinking you're overwhelmed yet. And so you do all this, and you have the person move in, you're engaged, you live with them, they have a child, you let them live with you. And about 3 years down the line, you might even add on to your house, which I did. So now I have a man in my house. I have his son in my house. I have, you know, a house that I'm remodeling to fit the extra 2 people from a 2-bedroom to a 3. So I'm spending money, and I'm there. And then all of a sudden, you know, after you're done with your remodel and you have an extra $1,000 payment, and you're hoping you're still going to get married, you think you're still going to get married, you lose your job after 15 years.
Wow.
And then on top of losing your job, you also, and I should tell you, in the middle of all this, I'm taking care of my mother who lost her husband about 10, you know, maybe 7 years prior, but I still take care of her. She doesn't live with me, but I take care of her. I'm her prime caretaker. And then you lose your job, and you think, well, you know, you don't really think too much about it at the time. Maybe after 15 years, you don't really care by that time, but especially if you have 401 and you've prepared. Yeah. But at the same time, you don't know if you're prepared. I didn't know I was not prepared. I did not know I was not prepared, because when I lost my job, I also at this time realized my relationship wasn't what I wanted it to be. So that didn't work out. So we broke up, and they moved out. And at the same time, now I'm stuck with all this extra, without the job, without the husband coming, without any future. And even though your mind says, well, let's think of something else we can do. You know, what else do you like to do? And even though I did things like that, I have to tell you, it took about as long as I had that job. So what has it been since 2006? It's been 13 years. And to be honest, that last 15 years never existed. I don't have one thing practically from those 15 years. I don't have a penny that out of all that 401k, out of all those things. I don't have a husband, never had any kids, don't have the house, I've been homeless twice without a place to live. And I have to tell you, sometimes you don't know you're overwhelmed because you might think you're just stressed because of a situation. And I would say to anybody that if you're overwhelmed is an easy word, like people saying now, oh, you're a narcissist. You know, these are very easy words to just say. But to be honest, overwhelmed, if you're overwhelmed, you're not. The Latin word for overwhelmed is buried deep. If you're ever buried deep, you can't move, you can't breathe, you're paralyzed, and I can guarantee you, you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, you know, it took me years to realize. I think I just realized lately because I've been, you know, lately that I said, you know, I just realized I was really overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking clearly.
How did you get through, Charlene?
Things I would say to people is, if you're overwhelmed, or if you think you're overwhelmed, a lot of times when you're overwhelmed, you won't even tell anybody. That's that's the clue right there. You won't tell anybody. You'll just maybe say, oh, I'm overwhelmed. And then somebody.
Well, if you don't, I mean, if you don't know and you're not aware of it. But Charlene, how did you get through it?
Well, it's taken 13 years for me to feel comfortable with being poor, I should say.
Well,
You know,
I can, but
being
Charlene,
myself.
I can say one thing about you, Charlene, because I've known you for almost 40 years, for over 40 years. Actually, I've known you over 40 years. You have this resilience. I've never seen anybody have like it. You're very spiritual, and the spirituality, I think, is how you got through this. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. I truly would agree with that. Yeah, I would have to say. Even when I think back, I know for sure I wasn't thinking clearly. I think when I first broke my rule, that was a big I never break rules. And when I did that, even though I was conscious of knowing I broke a rule, I still had a feeling somewhere deep inside that I probably shouldn't have done that. Then I think, well, I probably should have added that third bedroom. I was very happy with my house the way it was. I didn't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're overwhelmed because you have before this happened, right before I got laid off, I was a very busy girl. I'm an extremely busy girl, and they just don't pay you that kind of money to do nothing. You have to work your tail off. They own you. So, you're very busy, and sometimes just don't know. You're not thinking clearly. You just feel like you can do it, and you'll do it. But I have to say, it will come with consequences, because very few people I know, now I know the difference when people say, oh, he was a millionaire and he lost everything and he's a millionaire again. You're right. You lose everything. If you're lucky to get it back again through hard work, that's great. But not everybody gets to do that.
Yeah.
You have to just be secure with yourself to know that if it doesn't happen, it's okay. If I never see a house again that's mine, I'm okay with that. It's a lot of work. But if I never see it, it's not going to bother me. If I never got married, it's not going to bother you. You still have to be happy within yourself. But, if you want to avoid all the pain of working hard for 15 years and then losing everything you worked for, I would definitely keep track of how you feel and how you're thinking, and make a point to check your rule book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so you follow your intuition, and you're calling it your rule book, but really what you're saying is you follow your intuition. Like you just said, you had a deep intuition that something was off.
Yeah.
And the problem with when you work is the way you did work, which was intense and over the top. And I know because I was doing it at the same time, Charlene. So you and I were doing this at the same time. And I remember very well. And to the point where you're so overwhelmed, you don't even know, you can't think straight. You don't know what's normal. You just keep going because you're trying to continue. You just have to keep going. It's a weird place to be. And there's so many people out there that are in this position right now. So really what we're saying is slow it down, like sit down, have a cup of coffee, analyze your life. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Be honest with yourself before or right as you hit that overwhelm button, or actually use overwhelm to help you go, wait a minute, I am feeling it. So Charlene, you didn't understand that you were in overwhelm at the time. You didn't know, you just kept going.
No, I actually thought I was stressed and just was filling with, multitasking. I actually thought I was just doing my multitasking and very stressed, and I need to get these things done and just get on. But no.
So what you're saying is that sorry, I was just going to say what you're saying is in hindsight is when you broke the rules, when you broke a rule that you knew that you truly believed in, that was your first clue. That was
my first clue. Yeah.
So that's an important thing is for people to know themselves.
I would have been fine to this day.
Yeah. It's an important thing for people to know themselves well enough to know what really means a lot to them. And if you're breaking those, we'll call them rules, or those, areas, then maybe it's time to take a look and say, hey, am I overwhelmed, and am I making the best decisions for myself? Because an overwhelmed brain does not make the best decisions or the most sound decisions.
And I'm sorry to interrupt that. You know what else I just remembered that I'll tell you is I never talked to anybody about like,
She didn't talk to me about it.
nothing like,
Yeah.
you're right. I never said, I'm going to have this person and their son move in. I didn't discuss it with anyone. I just did it thinking, hey, I don't need to ask anyone's permission. I'm 50, going on, I don't know. I was 52 at the time. Who cares? I'm a big girl, but no.
Yeah.
That should have been, you got to ask your people who know you. And I'm sure I would have probably got some other answers, but no, I didn't. I didn't ask anyone. That's what I'm saying. I just kept it and did what I want. And I recommend people do not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. God, Charlene, I really appreciate your story so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling and sharing that with us. I mean,
I hope someone learned something from it.
yeah.
I think people will learn from that, Charlene. I mean, really, it's a really good message out there for slowing yourself down and knowing yourself and really paying attention to what you know about yourself before you make a decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's, I think, one of the key things is to know yourself well enough to know when you're doing some things that aren't who you really are. And so to be curious about that, not to judge it, but to sit back and be curious. Okay, why does it seem like I'm making decisions that are against how I think or what I believe in?
And I love, did you put that, what Carol Hernandez said? You put that up, you had blinders on. Should we just stop at times and check ourselves? I love that. Yes,
definitely.
the answer is yes. Take an inventory, Nancy, you're right. Take an inventory of your situation and be honest with yourself. I think that probably the best thing that we could learn on this show is to, once a month, maybe take an inventory. Would you say that's too much, Charlene? I mean, once a month, stop. Once a week, stop. How often should you do it?
I think, whatever works for you, just do a check-in, and maybe do a check-in with your friends, people that you can trust, so you can have a little bit of reality check and make sure that you're looking at your life and what's going on with your life, realistically. Rebecca is saying, what are the differences between tackling several challenges at once and being overwhelmed? That's a very good question.
That's a really good question. Well, let's see. I guess it depends on what the challenges are. But if you do a lot of challenges at once, I would probably be prepared to be somewhat overwhelmed. It's up there with what Charlene said, multitasking. It's doing this and doing this and doing this. Now, a right brain person, I used to be able to do 10 or 15 things at the same time. I don't think I did any of them all that well, but I could do a lot at the same time. But now that I'm more, bi-brained, I mean, I'm a lot more focused. I think doing a couple of things, couple of challenges maybe at once would prevent you from being overwhelmed. Shirley, what do you think?
I think if you're able to incorporate something that calms you, whether it's a 5-minute guided meditation or, like we brush our teeth we just do it because we're used to doing it, and that's what we do. So if you can still incorporate in your life, even if it's once a week, doing something that you truly enjoy, whatever that might be, then I think, there's the difference there between just doing a lot of stuff, so you're challenged, or being overwhelmed. When we're on overwhelm, we don't stop and kind of smell the daisies. Smell the roses is a wait.
No, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I think is important, what you just said, and I'm a huge proponent of this, meditation slows you down. Tai Chi slows you down. Anything that's yoga slows you down. Anytime you can slow, even if it's once a week, sit and do some deep meditation, meaning even if it's just a guided meditation, even if you're just sitting there and breathing and just allowing this spirit to come in and to ground yourself in that will change the brain waves and maybe give you a different perspective on, am I overwhelmed? Can I handle all this? And more importantly, what is happening now? What is happening here? As opposed to overwhelm, it's I don't know, and slow it down.
It'll keep you from getting overwhelmed, even if you have a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, we all live in this world, and we all can be juggling a lot of things at the same time. But the difference between overwhelm is when we don't spend any time doing something that really fills your soul and that you enjoy. For example, as we all know, it's music for me. So I always make sure that I've got a concert or something that I do, or even at the end of the night, I'll listen to some of my favorite songs, and that puts me right back in. And so even if you have a whole bunch of stuff going, you don't run the risk of getting overwhelmed because you're still taking care of yourself.
Right.
You're still doing something that calms you down.
Right.
Even
All right.
even for a moment.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
John, let's take a call now.
Yeah.
You got it. All right. Thank you very much for calling in, Charlene. We appreciate your
Yes.
story.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlene.
Char.
Really appreciate it. Really
and the
appreciate it.
inspiration
Thank you.
behind the show. Appreciate
Yes.
it.
I love her so much.
Wait a
Wonderful.
minute. And
She's my heart.
Not
I
to
love
mention,
her.
I hope I'm not stepping out of but she's an incredible astrologer. by the way.
Charlene is a great astrologer, everybody.
Yeah.
Charlene, you should be doing charts for everybody.
There you go.
Yeah.
Great
yeah.
astrologer.
So if you're okay with
Excellent.
it,
Come on and read in
Charlene, we
our
didn't.
group.
Yes, we didn't ask you your permission before that, but if you're open and willing for it, then we can put your website on
Absolutely.
on our thing, and yeah.
And one of the things that I do want to mention is during that last 15 years that she had that were really traumatic, frankly, she learned everything about astrology.
Oh,
so,
so
she's
good.
really, really good.
Yeah. So we'll put up her information if she allows it, so you guys can give her a call and get a reading from her.
Love it.
All right. Shirley, can you just lift up your mic just a little bit so we can hear you better? And I'm going to bring in the the caller on right now. Area code 760. Thank you so much for your patience. I know you've been holding for quite a while. Can we have your name, please, and where you're calling from?
Gina from Escondido, California.
Hey, Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Yeah. How can we help you? What's your story?
I related a lot to your topic today. I'm a perfectionist, and when I'm at work, I tend to get myself into overwhelm really easily with just all the tasks of the day. And a couple years ago, I had a job where my boss was pretty demanding, and I started getting panic attacks. I wanted to see if you had any tips on staying calm at work.
Okay, Cheryl. You start, then I'll add some spiritual ones.
Okay. Well, staying grounded, as much as possible, noticing your feet, noticing if he's very demanding, then, you have to stay grounded. Otherwise, it's going to take you right over, particularly because you're a perfectionist. And so it starts to feel like I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing enough. And that will spin you into anxiety anytime. So staying grounded, noticing what's going on. What does anxiety feel like? Is it in your tummy? Is it in your chest? We usually will feel it, in the viscera. Do you usually feel it in your tummy? What was that?
Chest.
In your chest.
Yeah.
So noticing it, notice your chest, notice, does the anxiety feel like a rock sitting there? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Many times when you tune into that, to the feeling in your body, it allows it to dissipate, even if it's just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say breathe.
Yeah.
Take a moment to breathe, to clear your mind. And I mean, a deep breath, do it 3 times, a deep breath, and then an exhale. And you will see when that happens, it changes the brainwave, it changes the lens. And that's really what you need to do during a time like that. And do it a few times a day, just so you know what's going on. So you don't, it sounds like you're an empath and an HSP. They have, as a perfectionist, they have the hardest time. Gina, what's your birth date?
June 28th, 1987. And you're totally right that I am an empath. And so I always
and you come in with,
enough better.
Yeah. And honey, you come in with fear. So there's only 2 things. Just remember that I'm saying this, as James always repeats this over and over, and it's the truth. There's fear and love, and your life path is about getting over fear. So I can see why you would go easily into, a panic attack. But just breathe, bring yourself back to, tell yourself everything is okay. Everything is okay. Because most often everything actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. But from a neurobiological standpoint, the breathing, breathe in for 4 counts, hold it for 4, and breathe out for 8. The breathing out stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what's going to calm you down.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So if you you breathe in, you count to 4, then you hold for 4, and then you release for 8.
For 8. So breathe out longer than you breathe in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of people say breathe, and they're like,
I have been taking walks too to get grounded.
Yeah.
So do make sure that you're very mindful when you take the walk. So notice your feet, as they're walking. Notice the trees. Notice the sounds. Ground yourself in all 5 senses, and that can be very helpful. That's called what do they call it? Mindful, mindful walking. So make sure that you're really mindful in your walking. You're noticing everything. If you're walking over leaves, notice the crunching of the leaves. That will help calm your nervous system too.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for all the tips, everyone.
Thanks
Oh,
for
you're
calling.
very welcome. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Gina. All right, so let's see here. We do have more lines open, so people can now call in even more if they want to. Rebecca is saying that she looked up the Destiny chart in the archives and loved that show. So Kelly,
Thanks.
when she reads, just to give people a little background, she's using the Destiny card system. So she looks at your birthday, has a card that applies to your birthday, and then gives you background on that, and then also intuitive insight.
It's amazingly accurate.
Yeah, it's amazing. And really what it does is it explains who you are pretty quickly. And then you're okay. I mean, know thyself. That's what this is all about.
I mean, the more you know, when I first took my somatic training, I was like, oh, that's why I do that. I didn't feel, for some people, it makes you feel like, oh my God, there's so much wrong with me. For me, it opened up this whole thing where it relaxed me actually, because now I knew where it stemmed from. And now I knew where to go to try and help myself with the things that I didn't like about myself. But the Destiny, I mean, Kel, I always tell you, I don't want to bug you, but I'll see a client, I'll get their birthday, and then I'll say, hey, Kel, what's January 2nd? And she'll just give me one line and it fits to a T. And these are poker cards. I don't understand it. How did the person who created poker cards know that they were doing something?
Very, very old science. It goes it's like a couple thousand years old. I mean, it goes way back, and somebody brought it back in, I think, in the 1920s. It was they call it. It was like the hidden. It was a hidden thing, and they brought it out. And
so, who created the poker playing cards to begin with?
Wasn't it? It goes all the way back to Olney Richmond or something.
Yes,
like that.
yeah. But it goes way back. What do they call it? There's the term for that. For this, it's like the hidden spiritual people that had this hidden thing, and it only came out in I want to say
Magi. I thought was
the Order of the Magi. Thanks, John. That's what it is. The Order of the Magi. And I remember when I had my head injury, they said to me on the other side, when I was on the other side, they said to me, I said, well, I've got to know. I was at the Hall of Records and I had to know every single thing about everything. Wow. And I was just pulling up all kinds of information. It was like mind boggling, except that I would have burned out, So they said to me, oh no, we're sending you this other thing. So sorry, can't come back here anymore, but we have something else for you. And I was like, what? Let me in, what are you doing? This is wrong. Let me back in. And anyway, then I got this science and it's amazingly accurate. So it does help because it gives people an awareness about who they are, what their journey is about on this trip. And it's just a trip, everybody. This is a long trip. It can be a shorter trip for some people, but it's a trip.
It is a trip, that's for sure.
It's a trip in every way.
Yeah.
And I posted in our group a while back a video of cards, clocks, and calendars and all the synchronicities between the three and how they reinforce one another. It's really quite interesting. So that's kind of what that's based on. So when I look at that system, I think of it like a bit of astrology, a bit of numerology, and a bit of tarot because of the cards, and itself. Predates the tarot, I believe.
And I also like
it really.
It sure does. It predates everything. I have astrologers that call me and say, "Will you tell me about this?" Because it always matches up with astrology. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably accurate.
Yeah. It's uncanny.
So we have a long comment that I won't display on the screen because it will fill up the whole screen. So I'm just going to read it to you.
Okay.
And I think she's explaining anxiety, but let's go into it. So Susie Boros is saying, I'm often overwhelmed by thoughts of the what ifs. My what ifs are short-term fears because the bad thing that I fear never materializes. Then a new fear comes up, so I'm constantly pushing the fears down to be able to function. I'm getting better, however, just trusting the divine and working at not getting overwhelmed by phantom possibilities.
So I remember I did a reading for Susie a while back, and what I do remember, Susie, is your birth placement, and it was all about. I remember she was in 8 of clubs, and that is a mind that has a mind of its own. Some people come in to have to learn to control their mind. They have to learn how to actually control it. So how does somebody do that? Be gentle on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Start to really love yourself. Be nice to yourself. That helps it. And then really you need meditation for a brain like that is probably the key, critical. The breathing technique that we talked about. And I can tell you everything's going to be okay. I mean, it's I think you just need to be calmed down.
Yeah.
8 of clubs always they have a hard life with that, with the brain. Move yourself from a brains into a heart center place.
Yeah, so then it's important to rewire your brain, retrain your brain to, Rick Hansen wrote this great book called The Buddha Brain. And it teaches you, gives you techniques. We'll see if we can get him on the show. Gives you techniques on how to calm the, what they call the monkey brain, which is anxiety. You're right, John. What you're describing is always worried about, what might happen is a function of anxiety. Sometimes people are stuck on the woulda, coulda, shoulda piece, which is from the past. But some people, the anxiety shows up in what might happen. And that is part of how the species survived, is by being able to anticipate what might happen and, do something about it so we didn't get killed. So there's a function for it. Anxiety all emotions have a huge important function in our world, but when it's too much, then they start to work against us. And so for an anxious brain, mindful meditation, knowing when you're going off. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say another one for that, aside from mindful meditation, really is Tai Chi, because then you're moving gently and you're moving the energy. And if you practice Tai Chi every day, it really starts to control the mind again. And it's that monkey brain, and you can control it.
Well, I think what the idea is, because you have to be in the here and now in order to do the movements. And when you're in the here and now, you're not thinking about what might happen in the future. So it trains your brain to come back to center.
And I will tell everybody out there, I used to really suffer from high anxiety. I mean, really high anxiety. I don't any longer. I have it for years. Have not for years.
Yeah.
I really learned to get control of it. And it was through yoga, through meditation, through Tai Chi, through breathing, through deep understanding of spirituality, having a faith that I know we're all going to be okay. We all,
and you know what happens too? I actually just worked with someone who had so much anxiety most recently. He couldn't sleep and it was really getting in the way. And so we broke it down. I said, okay, what's the fear? Well, I might get sick. Okay. And if you get sick, what might happen? I might get a disease. And if you get a disease, well, what would happen? Well, I'd go to the doctor and we planned everything out. And I said, okay, but let's say the doctor diagnosed you. You have a really bad disease. What might happen? And all of a sudden she took it. He thought for a moment and all of a sudden says, what if there's no one there to take care of me? And there was the entry point. That was causing all the anxiety. All of a sudden, the body relaxed. Even just naming it allowed the anxiety to calm down.
Wow.
So we break it down. What's the worst that can happen? Okay. And if that happens, what's the worst that can happen? And if that happens, and I would suggest that you do it with someone.
Yeah.
And when you're able to put words to what that anxiety is about, many times that in and of itself helps calm you.
Yeah.
So Charlene is asking, why am I overwhelmed? If one has 3 life-changing events happening or being planned, one can expect not to see and feel clearly.
Yeah.
Consider speaking to someone you trust and knows you. Absolutely. Yeah. And or a therapist too. Therapist is not just because you can't handle your life. Therapist is someone who you can bounce things off of. The reason why it works is because there isn't that dual relationship. They don't know you from anybody. They don't know people who know you. It's a very kind of personal relationship.
Yeah. And in life, there will be there will be more than one big overwhelm. It could be, the end of a relationship, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, it could happen all at once.
Yeah.
So you do need somebody to ground you, to talk to, and to help you work through it.
Yeah. And Joanna's saying, I find myself more and more not wanting to do things outside of the home because of the what ifs. I'm flying next week and not thrilled to do it at all. Okay, Joanne, I would suggest that you don't do that. The more you do that, the harder it's going to be to get out.
Right.
And so a trick to do that, especially for flying when people have a lot of anxiety, is engage the thinking part of your brain. So grab a magazine and read it. It doesn't matter what the magazine is about, what the book is about, right? Because in order to read, you have to use this part of your brain. And if you use this part of your brain, the brain will stay connected. So read a magazine. When you have to go out and run an errand, right before you go out, sit there and read and notice that the anxiety is going to decrease just a moment, and then get in your car and go do your things. Don't stay home because it'll become much harder to get out.
Right. Oh, that's such a great advice, Shirley.
Yeah. Yeah. It's keeping the thinking part of your brain engaged. So however you do it, count backwards, read a magazine. When people sit in the airplane, just start reading. Sit down, buckle yourself in, and just start reading.
Well,
even
that's
if you
what
can't.
I've always done. And
Really?
I look at the auras. That's another trick, but that's for another show. I actually
hilarious. Oh my God.
I see their auras and I go, yeah, we're fine. And then I forget about the rest. And then I put myself in my thinking brain. I just read.
That is
I'm going to
so
tell you another thing
fun.
on a plane, to write. It's very good for writing. If you because you can just do is focus. It's fabulous.
Exactly. That anything that engages your thinking part. If you're driving and you start to feel anxious, start reading license plates, start reading restaurant signs, start reading street signs. Anything that keeps the thinking part of your brain online.
Wow. All right. Well, John,
we are almost out of time.
We are. Yeah, we have just a couple minutes left. And I just want to remind people to join our free support group here on Facebook. That's where we post a lot of our helpful information. And, we also do a group check-in every Thursday now. Kel and I, we come on and we check in with the group. And so we are looking forward to doing that again. That's at 2 p.m. Pacific time on Thursdays. And that's 4 Kel's time and 5 Eastern time. So,
I do mini readings, call in, check in, see how you're doing, see how everybody's doing. Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to all our callers and all those who shared in the comments as well. That's how we all learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week.
Oh, wait, one more thing too. Our shows are up. Our webinar, John, is up, ready to go.
Oh, right.
Excellent. Yeah. So check out Both Sides Now TV for that information. Both Sides Now
TV.com.
And I'm going to put that in the comments as well for people so they can check that out. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care. Do not overwhelm yourselves. Learn to food.
And if you do ground,
do the lion. That was I like that.
Go.
Yeah.
Bye.
Right. Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kelly White. Two perspectives,